My guest today is Dr. Richard Lapchick, and Dr. Lapchick is a foremost authority in many things. He's an academic, he's an activist, and he's done incredible things in his career. The reason he's in Dallas-Fort Worth this particular week is he's going to be on a panel discussing diversity and inclusion that's been put together by the Black Sports Professionals of North Texas and the Dallas Influencers in Sports and Entertainment. We were lucky enough to get him to come to the studio to talk about a couple of these topics, which are frankly fascinating and vital to the world of sports. So I think the first thing I'm curious about as I was thinking about this interview is, my colleague Dave is shooting this in 4K. We'll edit it in high definition. It will not be hard for people to figure out that you and I are not exactly the types of people that appear on posters for diversity and inclusion. Is it still valid for us to be discussing this topic?
Well, if there aren't allies in the discussion, whatever form of discrimination you're talking about, whether it's race or gender or LGBTQ issues, if it's only the people who are being discriminated against, the chances of them being ultimately successful and fighting it are less than they are if they have allies from all other areas. So, it's something I've been lucky enough to spend most of my 74 years doing. I came from a family where that was part of our life, and that had a big influence on me, and including in the world of sport. And I just decided at some point, because of various personal things that happened to me and my dad, that I was going to use the sports platform as a way to address social justice issues.
Well, and your father was Joe Lapchick, a Hall of Fame basketball player, influential coach. How did he come to help you realize that A, diversity and inclusion was important, and B, that sports could be a vehicle for it?
Well, literally, my earliest memory as a child is looking outside my bedroom window in Yonkers, New York, where I was raised, and seeing his image and effigy hanging from a tree with people under the tree picketing. And for several years after that, I'd pick up the extension phone in the house, and it was racial epithet after racial epithet being hurled at him, and I had no idea what any of it was about as a 5, 6, and 7-year-old kid. But I knew that a lot of people didn't like the person who was my best friend, and it turned out, I would realize later, it was because as the coach of the New York Knicks, he had signed the first African-American player in the history of the NBA, Nat Sweetwater Clifton, in 1950. There were a lot of people in the country who did not want that to happen.
So a lot of folks may not know who Nat Sweetwater Clifton was. And one of the things that you had written in one of your books that I read was that sometimes today, young people may not know the history of this sort of thing. They may not know who Arthur Ashe is. They may not know who Roberto Clemente is. Why is it important that they maybe have knowledge of some of these folks?
Well, I think it's important because we didn't just appear here and life was as it is. We all who have been able to do something, as the saying goes, grew up on the shoulders of giants. And there were people in my youth growing up that I feel that way about. And today's generation, this happened to me, we were in New Orleans, and I was taking a group of my students to the Arthur Ashe Center to do a program on race, and these are graduate students in sports management that emphasizes diversity. And I said, and I checked myself, did I even ask them this question? I said, do you know who Arthur Ashe was? And one of the 8 students knew that he was a tennis player, and that was it. So I decided at that point that I was going to make part of every class I do at the University of Central Florida have an emphasis on finding who those heroes are and why I consider them heroes and why they might learn something from them in the process.
ASHE, for those of you who are going to Google it and look it up, which as we now know would be a good thing for you to do. A guy I've gotten to do a little bit of work with is Sidney Moncrief, and he does workshops on diversity and inclusion. And one of the things he emphasizes is a concept of empathy, the idea of being able to put yourself in the other person's shoes and empathize with what they're feeling. Does sports lend itself to generating empathy among different types of people?
I think for sport, people lower their guard when they're on a basketball court or on a football field or a baseball diamond or whatever the sport facility is. They're out there to play a game. They want to be the best at it. If they have a teammate who doesn't look like them that's going to make them better, they generally appreciate that person and want them on the team. And there's not many other areas that I think of in the world where that takes place. I mean, I call the miracle of sport the huddle, because once we get in that huddle, I can't think of any other part of our nation or perhaps the world where it suddenly doesn't matter if you're African American or white, Latino, Asian American, Native American, or Arab American, Protestant, Catholic, Buddhist, Sikh, Jew, Hindu, or Muslim, young or old, gay or straight, you're not going to win if you don't pull together as a team. And if we took that concept into other aspects of American society, especially at the time we're living in, we would have a chance to be doing much better than we are in terms of improving the opportunity for people to get equal opportunity.
As I mentioned, Dr. Lapchick's in town because he's going to be doing a forum with others, and the panel includes Cynt Marshall, who is in charge of the Dallas Mavericks now, and Nancy Lieberman, trailblazing basketball star. Why is it useful for have events, and why did you make the trip from Central Florida to actually come and speak on a panel like this?
I happen to really admire the other two people on the panel a lot, so that had a lot to do with it. I think that we need to have more discussions that lead to actions at this time in our history. We're here in a week where people are shouting, "Send her home." They used to shout, "Put her in jail." This is a mentality in the country that we need to have rational discussions about, and getting people who are thought leaders with other people in the community who are leaders and can actually implement actions, I think is critically important. If we just go and have a good discussion tonight, it's not going to mean anything. If we go and some people leave and do something different in their world that makes life better for somebody else or creates opportunities, then it will have had a powerful impact.
You certainly have plenty of experience in ways of creating dialogue. Is that more measured dialogue, calmer discussion, if you will, important and useful in creating thoughts around these topics?
I think you have to create a safe environment that people can feel free to share their beliefs, even if they're not the beliefs that they know other people in the audience have, and that they are there with the understanding that those beliefs will be listened to. Maybe they won't respect the particular position, but they'll be listened to. And then sometimes people learn in the course of those discussions that their thought process hadn't exactly been accurate, and if they're open to change themselves and absorbing something new, then something good happened.
And I would suggest maybe a little bit more in depth than a tweet with about 10 exclamation marks on it. So, Dr. Lapchick, thank you very much for joining us today. Definitely appreciate the work you have done in this area, and it's not only interesting, but really important too.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. With Dr. Richard Lapchick for the Fort Worth Weekly, I'm Rush Olson.